This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. It's a dangerous game in the computer history field to call anything the first, but ByPhone is a very strong contender to call itself the first online Yellow Pages. Years before Yahoo, before Craigslist, ByPhone was a text-based dial-up service available at 300 and 1200 bits per second that provided business listings, movie times, and personal ads, all for free to callers. The service was launched in late 1982 and was limited to the West Los Angeles area. ByPhone was the brainchild of brothers Bill and David Lappen. Here's what the August 1984 issue of IEEE Computer wrote. ByPhone's electronic Yellow Pages service for Los Angeles is answering over 3,000 customer requests a day on anything from movies to restaurants to auto repair. And the best part? It's all free. The philosophy was to provide sponsored information paid for by the advertiser, not the consumer. The computer organizes over 10,000 listings to respond exactly to the caller's request. According to the company, the system had to be easy for computer novices to operate, yet powerful enough to be of value. 4 proficiency levels are used, each introducing additional features. Beginning users only see 6 different categories of listings: restaurants arranged by price or nationality, movie schedules, plays. As users advance, they see an expanded list and are shown how to formulate a search. Retrieved listings are arranged by their distance from the user, with the closest shown first. Expert users are able to specify time and day when they want to buy an item and get information only about stores that are open then. ByPhone is now testing expansion to determine how difficult it will be to create similar systems in other cities. I interviewed ByPhone founders Bill and David Lappen on March 14th, 2025. Okay, so first of all, most importantly, we've got Bill and David Lappen. Who's the older brother?
Bill, I am.
Bill.
By 2 years, year and a half or something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
All right. Great. So I'd like to start before the beginning, before you created ByPhone. If you could kind of give me some prehistory about education, how you got into computers, and we'll kind of go from there. Do you want to start, Bill, since you're older?
Sure. Okay. All right. So I was practicing law before we started. I was a lawyer. I had gone to law school and I had also gotten an MBA. And during law school, I got computer time. And during undergraduate, I had gotten computer time. This was back in the late 70s. And you had to vie for computer time to be able to use the computer at the school. It wasn't just freely available. So in undergraduate, I'd gotten computer time and had programmed a bunch of things. And in law school, I was able to get it through the MBA, and I programmed a backgammon. So the computer would play against me. That was probably my best accomplishment in law school. I was always not always, I was very interested in computers. I had very little training. I had had a couple classes. I had had one undergraduate class, and the professor said, come into my graduate level class. And I was an undergraduate, but I went into the graduate level class. So I think I had an affinity to it, but not really much education in it, but had a lot of time programming. And so that's where I was before we started the business. And I was happily practicing law, but I didn't know that it was going to be my career. I wasn't sure. I was fine.
Mm-hmm. David?
Well, I came at it a little differently. I went to Stanford and started in electrical engineering. So my background is more technical. I think the first computer I ever saw was the old paper tape teletext terminals. And then we moved up in beginning of college to the IBM punch cards, and it just fascinated me. But there wasn't much in the way of computer programming being offered in the college in those days, so it was electrical engineering. And I ended up going to England for a year after college on a Marshall Scholarship to study the sociological, political, and economic effects of technology. And then came back, did a master's at Stanford in computer design, and went from there. Ended up working for a company for a short time that made test equipment for the back end of semiconductor assembly lines. So they test the chips as they came off the line.
All right. So what was the genesis for the creation of BiPhone?
Well, we would get together on the weekends and just sort of brainstorm about ideas, trying to see if there was something we could come up with to work together on. And the big thing at the time was Yellow Pages, a lot of money there, a lot of business, a lot of geographic, diversity on it. And we decided that computers could probably do that better. We were looking at the impetus for computers going into the house, and we thought that the bank at home industry was going to drive that. I had seen modems in my Stanford days. There was a guy named Red Gillette who ran the stock room where you could get parts, and he gave me, as I left, an old 300 baud modem, acoustic modem, where you put the thing in. And I was fascinated with the idea of communications, and that computers could talk to each other and would be able to open up this world.
But remember, in 1982, which is when we started this, people didn't have modems in their homes, and most people didn't have computers in their homes. So this was all brand new. I think we were the world's first electronic Yellow Pages. We're the first that we knew about. About 6 months or a year later, the French government came up with one. I think it was called Minitel, I believe, that they would put terminals into people's homes and run it. But we were there before them, and we were there way too early. And that might have been a problem, but that's where we were.
Sure. All right. So you had this idea to create an electronic Yellow Pages because you had fiddled with a modem that one time. Is that basically it?
Well, the modem was the impetus to start thinking about communications. And the Yellow Pages was a successful business model that we thought was could easily be computerized and could add a lot of value to. So our original system would get where the person was located and show them places that were close to them, show them places that were open now, and the information could change on a daily basis so that they could have movie schedules, specials. All these things couldn't be provided by Yellow Pages.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so how did you go about creating the thing, getting the hardware, writing the software? Tell me the story.
Well, at the time, there were computers available that we found that would dedicate a processor with microprocessors to each incoming modem. And they would allow multiple boards to be hooked up to a common database or controller. And we liked the style of that architecture. And it was amazing because in those days, we had to buy a hard drive, and the thing was probably 3 by 2 by 1 foot, multiple $1,000s, and it held 10 megabytes. And we were blown away that that capacity existed. And that's how we set up the original system, with a bunch of modems out of our parents' house, and a bunch of phone lines coming in, because it was well before the internet was publicly available. And then when we started writing the software.
Wow. So this was literally run out of your parents' house with a bunch of phone lines, and I don't know, that seems pretty kind of low tech. It was all low tech, but
Well, we were bootstrapping it,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah, neat. How many lines did you start with? How many did you ultimately have?
I think we started with probably 3 or 4 lines, and then in the LA area went up to about 25. And General Telephone at the time kept wondering what we were doing with that many phone lines coming into a residence. They probably thought we were doing illegal betting or something.
Hmm.
They
Interesting.
said they had never run that many phone lines into a residence except for in Ronald Reagan's house, who was not that far from our parents' house. They had run that many phone lines in because he needed them, but nobody else needed that many phone lines. What in the world were we doing? We showed them and they didn't believe it, but you know.
So I would like to know why you were doing this out of West LA. It was just because you were in there. That's where your parents' house was. Is that was it just a matter of convenience? That's where you started?
Back then, phone calls were only free for about a 6 or 8 mile radius from where you were located. So it turned out that Westwood, which is where our parents lived, was pretty good because it was about that far from the ocean, and then we could cover almost into downtown, and then cover almost to well into the San Fernando Valley, not very far in, and a little bit south. So we it was a good location to start with because of the fact that people were not willing to pay to call a long distance number. That was, long distance within LA was more than 6 or 8 miles.
Hmm.
Those calls would all cost money per minute, and so we didn't think that people would do that. Later on, we ended up putting an office in Hollywood to also serve people because again, it was still, even though it was later on, it was still a charge for those calls. So we had to start moving to other areas too. But yeah, it turned out that that's where our parents lived, so it was cheap rent, but it was also really a good location because it just had good coverage.
So what did your parents think of this? All this crazy wires and hardware, computers, running out of their basement or wherever it was.
It wasn't the basement; it was my bedroom.
Oh, okay.
They didn't care. The wires all came in underground, and the computer, everything was in my bedroom, and it was really isolated there. We did not take over the whole house. Once the wires came in from the phone company, they were routed one time. They did a construction job to bring up the cabling into the room, and after that, it was a simple connection. And we really didn't disturb them much. We were over there a lot and we ate a lot, but we didn't disturb them much. It was all contained.
Nice.
And we got Westwood, which was important to us because we were pretty heavy into the movies. Of all of our things in the electronic yellow pages, the movies changed the most. Every week there would be a change in all of the movies, or almost all of them. And the movie times would change during the week, and we could keep that stuff updated. But Westwood was an important area for movies. I think at the time there were probably more than 10 movie theaters in Westwood, probably 15. Dave, do you know how many theaters there were? There were a lot of
No, I don't
theaters in
remember. There
Westwood.
were a lot of
Yeah.
theaters in Westwood and surrounding areas. Yeah.
So when the movie listings changed, were you just keying them in by hand?
Yes. Yes.
So
We
you'd
we
look at the
weren't.
newspaper or call the
Yes, we did both newspaper and called the theater.
uh-huh.
And we did that every Friday morning. I think it was Friday. The movies changed on Friday. It might have been Thursday, but I think it was Friday. And we would get in early and call and be sure that we had the right schedule for the weekend coming up. We tried working with a couple of the movie theaters, and we were sort of into one of them. And they basically looked at our system and they said, "We're not going to pay you anything because you need us because we are giving you the value that you have." And they were right. We still wanted money, but they were right that they were really providing a lot of value for our service.
And did people were people calling in for the movie listings? Was that more convenient for folks than
I think there were. I think we didn't run studies. My guess is more than a third, probably close to a half of the people using our system were accessing the movies, just because that's the stuff that changes constantly. And with the communications that they had, that's what they were interested in. They know where the restaurants are that they like. They're interested in a new restaurant occasionally. But the movies is every weekend something has changed. And so the information was constantly new. So that I think is probably what drove a lot of it. We would occasionally snoop on sessions where we would see what people were asking and what their responses were to see how the system was performing and stuff. And there were a lot of movie requests.
so I read a bunch of articles contemporary articles about by phone, and many of them said there were 10,000 listings in the database for
Sounds about
businesses.
right. Yeah.
How did those get entered? Were those also hand keyed? Because that seems
Yes.
terrible.
Yes. We hired people to go through and the white pages, not the yellow pages, the white pages, and enter any business that they understood what it was. If you could read the name of it and know what it is, enter it. So if it's John's car repair, that's fair. If it's John's, you can't enter that. We don't know what to do with that. But if we knew what to do with it from the name, then go ahead and enter it. And so we gave them white pages from the various areas that we covered with our free calling, and said enter. And we paid them per entry. And then once they came in, then we started categorizing them and working them so that they could be retrieved.
I see. And and then businesses could also choose to pay for a premium listing or something like that, as I recall.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. Yes, if a business wanted more information than just their address and their phone number, if they wanted to have hours, if they wanted to have specials, if they wanted to say something about why they're doing what they're doing or whatever, then they could pay for that. And we would
And
give them more space. Now, as David said, we didn't have a lot of space, 10 megabytes. There were no graphics because back then the modems were slow enough that graphics were too slow. So it was all text-based. And so uh, the specials and whatever would just be descriptions of. We couldn't do pictures.
sure. I convinced my dad, who ran a travel agency, to buy an ad. It was like $100 a year, or 150 or something like that. And so I don't. Did you get any other sales other than my dad?
Yeah, we did. I don't think we had 100 at any one time, but we did have some. But I don't think it ever got to 100. But there were a few sales.
Yeah.
Of the 10,000, 100 is not a big number,
No,
and
no.
we didn't get there.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now,
And
our
it was
biggest
just too
problem,
early.
the biggest problem, that's right, we were too early. The biggest problem is we would go in and talk to the owners of the businesses and tell them all about their business could be found on a computer, and they didn't know what a computer was. And then if we got some who understood what a computer was, they didn't know what a modem was. So how could somebody get this information from their home? So we were too early. They just didn't understand the concept. But we tried.
Right. Yeah. Direct sales for something that people just didn't understand must have been very difficult. I found a quote from you from one of you at the time saying like, oh, the company says selling computer-based advertising to retailers who may not know much about computers is difficult.
Yeah, difficult is right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're always worried about fraud, and they don't understand what a computer is. So why is this real? What is the value here? I don't have a computer. I don't think any of my customers do. And that could be true, but we'll bring in new customers who you don't have. Um, so that was one option that we
And
had. Yeah.
one attempt to address this was we created basically a plastic card like a credit card that would identify them so they could then users could take that in, show it, get a discount, and then show the proprietor that they were actually using the system to get the information.
Interesting.
And
Huh.
another thing we did was we went to a few hotels and put public terminals in the lobby of the hotels so that people who didn't have computers, who were at a hotel visiting from out of town, would have access to the system. And I think, David, I think that the computer that we placed dialed right into our system. I don't think
It did.
it went anywhere else. Yeah, it was dialed right to us because there was no internet. So they pushed a button and it connected to us. Yeah.
Interesting. How many of those public terminals would you guess that you did?
Five, maybe around LA, something like that. Maybe
And
four
we
or
had to
five.
build up the cabinetry for it and mount the computer inside and the monitor inside, the modem inside. Um, they were hand-built prototypes.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, so I keep seeing the numbers that you had 3,000 calls a day, or maybe it was 3,000 searches a day. It was a little nebulous in what I was reading. What do you think? How many calls a day or people did you get?
I would
I
guess those
really,
calls. I don't think we ever measured searches, did we, David?
Yeah, we kept track of that. We had metrics going,
of number of
but I
searches?
don't. Yeah, and I don't remember what that was, and it depends on the time too, because as Bill said, these were sort of hyper local based on the phone free phone calling areas, and eventually we ended up opening a lot of satellite locations in Vancouver, around the United States, in Toronto, and then eventually in Hong Kong and Singapore that provided that, but also moved into a different business that was, uh, when we saw how people were using the system, we moved into that. Now that's probably moving a little too far ahead,
Hmm.
but
So, so it was launched in, iPhone launched in 1983, I believe. Does that sound about right?
late 82, early 83.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did did it did it make any money?
We made some money, but we didn't make a profit.
Okay. All
We
right.
didn't cover our costs.
Okay.
We had some income, but we didn't cover the cost.
And the income was from businesses
Advertising.
advertising?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we had any other income. We didn't have any income from the terminals we placed. We did that for free.
Right.
So I think it was just the advertising.
But eventually we did find a way to make some money. One day we were contacted by some entrepreneurs out of Vancouver who wanted to try and make the system work and franchise effectively one of these systems. And we worked with them. They put it in. We cloned the system with with a computer located in Vancouver, and they were having trouble with selling the ads. They actually created what they called Egbert, which was a terminal they could sell because people didn't have computers. It was a little portable CRT keyboard. They mounted a modem on top of it and sold that as a way people could get into the system. And at some point, they came to us and said, "We're not getting enough use. We want to provide the Vancouver Stock Exchange on there because it's sort of a wild stock exchange. People want to keep track of it, and that'll be this free service that will really introduce this and give us another reason to sell these terminals and to sell the service." And shortly after doing that and setting up the feed for the Vancouver Stock Exchange, they came back to us and said, 80% of our traffic is for the stock exchange. And maybe we need to be charging for that and making that a business. So we started implementing that in Vancouver. And then that became a business that we could actually charge for real-time stock quotes.
Interesting. Without the usual 15-minute delay that was all often, I don't know if that was the rule in Canada actually, but uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was. And if you could have real-time stock quotes. Yes.
Neat. Before we get too far into that, I would like to know more about the hardware of the original BiPhone. Was this a CPM machine? Was this like an IBM PC or was some sort of mini computer?
It was actually before the PCs were ubiquitous, and it was based on CPM. And it had individual boards with Z80s on them that were dedicated to each user, and then a controller board that interfaced with the hard drive and then handed the data over to the individual boards as they needed it. So it was a networked system.
So a user would call in and they would have a dedicated computer to them. They would share memory to get to the information, but each call had its own computer.
Wild. Excellent. And did you write the software for this, David?
We both did.
Hmm.
Yep, we wrote
It,
the software,
it was
and we
written.
were, pardon,
Sorry, it was written in the language of.
BASIC.
Okay. All right.
Well, yes, but there was also a lot of assembly stuff, David. Remember?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Especially as we got more and more users, we needed to be more efficient. So a lot of it was done in assembly.
Yeah.
With calls from BASIC.
Is there any chance you still have any of the code?
It's one of those things. I think we have the code, and they're probably on tapes that can't be read anymore.
If you can find the tapes, I can get them read. So,
Oh, okay.
so
Interesting.
I've just read an 8-inch disc yesterday, and that's easy. For tapes, I'll need to hunt around, but we can get it done. That'd be fun to see the see that if you're willing to share it.
Sure.
Um, okay, so Biphone's humming along, then you start doing the Vancouver Stock Exchange. Um, and it sounds like that was a little more successful because you can sell access to that data.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And then
Um,
that grew to include the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we opened up an office in Toronto. And then while we were there, we brought in all the US exchanges. And then we came into New York with an office and set up a few more offices around. So we now had the US and the Canadian exchanges.
wow. So I'm guessing by now it's not running on CPM machines, running basic
Well,
software.
it's interesting. We were originally cloning these systems in each location. It seemed like every time we called in to get another computer, they had changed the model. So the hardware was slightly different. We had to program it slightly differently, especially with the assembly code. And we called in, I think, for the Toronto system on a Friday to this company we were using for the computers and said, we want to order another one. And they said, well, we've discontinued that one. We've got a new one coming up. And so over the weekend, we sat down and said, okay, if we were to build a computer ourselves, what would we want to build? And so we worked over the weekend and came up with an architecture that could handle um, a couple orders of magnitude more users at a lower price. And on Monday, when they called and said, well, we can find one of those old computers, we said, well, I think we're going to build one ourselves. So for the next year, we designed the boards and the operating system and uh, built this machine that could handle like 20,000 users rather than 30, and multiple stock feeds coming in from around the world. And that was quite a bit of fun.
Nice. Is this what you called the Fastex computer?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
All right. Neat.
And that
Um,
went into New York, the main computer. We stripped it down and used parts of it, the same basic architecture at remote sites. And the architecture was still the same. Every caller had their own computer, and each of those computers would go to shared memory. So that architecture stayed the same. We just had no hard drive in it. Instead of a hard drive, we were using RAM. And that gave us a lot of speed, and that gave us the ability to process a lot of stock trades very quickly. There was one day during the Reagan administration, a Black Friday, where somebody from Charles Schwab called our office in New York and said, I don't get it. You guys are 2.5 hours ahead of Quotron. There was a huge volume trading that day. And they said, what are you doing? And we said, well, we don't have a hard drive. We go right to the memory and it's much, much faster. And so I guess I don't know if it was 2.5 hours. That's what they said. We knew it was faster because that's the way it was designed. The problem with it is if we lost power for more than half a second or whatever, we wiped the whole thing out. So
right.
we had to get a UPS in there to keep the thing running. Um, but it was really fast. And so we could handle the stock feeds.
Neat. When you said you can handle 20,000 users, you don't mean like you didn't have 20,000 phone lines, right? At
We
that point.
didn't, but we could have scaled it to that.
Yeah. Okay.
I
We
think,
had in the New York office, we had a couple hundred
yeah.
lines.
And then the remote offices would have 20 to 50 or whatever they were. Um, I think in China, in Hong Kong, we probably had 50. I don't know. I don't remember, but yeah.
So Biphone seems to have starts disappearing from the BBS listings around 1987. Does that sound about right? Tell me about when. I know you moved on to stock exchanges and thing, but with the original Biphone thing, how long did that last? When
Well, it
and
was
how did
longer
you
than
shut it down?
87.
No?
Yeah, I would say it was more than 10 years, wouldn't you, David?
Well, we did move on to the stock quotes, and I don't know at what point we really de-emphasized the yellow pages
But I think we
itself.
kept it running.
we did keep it running in
Yeah,
West LA,
yeah.
probably the whole time up until about
I'm guessing more than
94.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I'm just going off old listings of bulletin board systems, so there's nothing less reliable than that information. So
Well, we were not promoting it certainly,
sure.
because we were busy with the stock quote services.
Um, so it sounds like as a business, you found success with the stock quote thing, expanding to multiple cities. You had subscribers paying for the information and lots of users and
Yes.
all right.
Yeah.
Nice.
We were told at one point that we were the largest provider of real-time stock information to private users in the US.
Hmm. And were your users like what we would call today day traders? Maybe it was called that then.
Yes. Yeah, they were basically they would be at home and they would just dial in and they would stay on all day. So we had a computer dedicated to them and all day long they would be on the phone. So that was an issue with the cost point of view because we were expecting multiple people on the computer and they would just take it for the whole day. Because as you say, they were day traders, yeah.
Were they paying
Per month.
per month,
Yeah,
not
per
per
month.
minute or something?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
per month. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Um, all right. So what happened next? I mean
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
as we said, we expanded into the other locations. And the way we did this was working with companies that wanted to go public and use our technology. We provided the technology and servicing for them, and they did all the marketing and customer service and billing. And so we had a publicly traded company in Canada, one in the US, and Hong Kong and Singapore were, I don't know, Bill, who were they owned by? Were they?
You know, the guy they brought in, I don't think was an owner, Hong or whatever his name was. I don't think he was an owner. I think he
No,
was
but
an employee. Yeah, I don't
I
know
don't
who.
know if it was owned by the Vancouver company or the US company,
I
or
don't know.
whether they had their own companies. Anyway,
There was a company, but I don't know who owned that company. I don't remember it. It
okay,
probably was Vancouver, but no, you know, it was probably U.S. because U.S. was bigger by then because we had
right,
gone public. Remember, the U.S. had gone public too.
right, yep,
The Vancouver company never went public, I don't think. Yeah.
yeah.
And then
Well,
Toronto
they
might
did.
have been
I
a
thought they
different
went.
company. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I think they
Toronto was,
went public in Toronto. I think they went public.
they did. Okay.
That was the first one. Yeah,
And how long did the stock trading service last, or the stock information service last?
it lasted till about 1994.
It's good
Um,
long run.
at which, yes, and it was interesting because uh, right about then we were starting to hear about this thing called the internet, and a company wanted to buy out the stock quote service from the publicly traded companies and ended up buying it out. Probably, we figure about 6 months before all this information became free on the internet. So the timing was very good.
Nice. Well, on Buy Phone, you had free personal ads, and I'm some kid who was about my age in the LA area posted an ad. You know, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was just like, you know, I like Atari computers and looking for people to, you know, hang out and trade games with. And I met this guy Tim, and Tim and I are still buddies. We hung out just like
Wow.
all the time
Yeah, that's great.
when we were kids. And we met on Buy Phone. We hung out all the time. We traded games. We played Mule. We you know we went to birthday parties together and whatever. And we're you know we're still Facebook friends. So a
Oh, that's fabulous.
successful Buy Phone friendship.
Yeah.
I found another something else. What was it in uh, Color Computer Magazine, April 1984? David Lappen. David, you wrote, um, I recently saw the following ad on Los Angeles dial-up computerized Yellow Pages Buy Phone. Roommate wanted. I am looking for a roommate to share a two-bedroom apartment. You may also have partial use of my IBM PC computer. Maybe it should be recast. Lonely computer seeks playmate. Also included partial use of apartment.
Now,
God, I have
what
no
year was
remember.
that? What year was that?
84.
See, computers were still very rare, so it
Yeah.
was a big deal to have a computer. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Um,
That's funny.
yeah, I dialed in with my 300 baud modem that plugged into the joystick port of my computer, so
Which is why we couldn't have, one of the reasons we couldn't have any kind of graphics,
right.
because you can't do much with 300 baud.
No, no,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyway, I think the whole just the some of the things that you two created were so prescient and so computerized yellow pages, uh, uh, online personal ads, and movie listings. I mean, you were too early,
We
certainly,
were too
but
early by
but
20
Really.
years.
but you did Craigslist 30 years before Craigslist.
Yeah, well,
Um and it was just an amazingly forward-thinking idea.
We
You
had
should have.
another thing that we started with that was interesting. Very early when we put the system out, we realized that people were confused by it because it was a lot to take in at once if you didn't know computers. And so we created a system where when you came in, you said um, how experienced you were in using the system.
Hmm.
And based on that answer, it would give you other features or more information, more instructions. Certain, as I said, certain features weren't available until you got to the second or third level. And that was the first time I had ever heard of that kind of system
Hmm.
that adjusted to how your understanding of where you were and what you could deal with.
Neat. I don't recall that. That's a fun idea. I'm sure, yes, I'm sure you got people in there who were computer experts, and you probably got people who were barely knew what a modem was.
Right. And the more they used it, they could then jump up to other levels and get more features and more and streamline the searches with less information
So
back to them.
how I know you said you sometimes watched calls and you could look at analytics and that sort of thing. Uh, How did you have any problems with? I liked to call into my phone because it was a free BBS and the line was never busy and I could just screw around with someone else's computer at no cost. But thank you for that. Did did you have any problems with abuse, with freakers, with people trying to crash the system or anything like that?
We never did.
Huh.
no.
No, people were very positive about the system and very enthusiastic and would be more interested in helping us than in any way damaging or I don't even think we got. I don't remember ads that were abusive
No.
or needed censoring even.
Wow.
No,
A different
as you said,
time.
people can put on personal ads, and we never had problems with those. Yeah.
That's impressive. I guess it was a different
This
time.
was early times.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Wild. Holy cow. All right, so
Yeah.
just yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, sorry, you'd be if today it wouldn't last 5 minutes,
I think that's
before.
right.
No. We'd have to hire full-time people just to look at new ads and make sure they didn't need to be censored.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. So, as a company, BuyPhone still exists today. It seems like. Of course, you're not doing the same thing, but you still have the website. I would like to know what y'all are doing today and how the name has lasted so long.
Well, we kept the name around. It was a company that was owned by the two of us. And so we just kept it as we would do other businesses. We would just throw them into there as a method of sharing the business. And we're completely out of computers now. We did a stint with medical imaging where we would take X-rays and other images and move them around a hospital or within a doctor's office for display purposes, for storage purposes. And we did that for, would you say more than almost 10 years, Dave? Would you think with the X-ray,
I
with
think it
the,
was more than 10 years. Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
And we still have some clients who are doing that, and we do support them. They bought the software 6, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it is, and we don't charge them anything. We still support them if they have questions and problems. We don't have a lot of those still left because most of them have already moved on to something else, but we do have some. Uh, and right now, we're using by phone really for real estate investing. So it has nothing to do with computers particularly, except for the fact that the bills that we do are all generated automatically by the computer. But other than that, it really isn't a computer system anymore.
Nice. Um, so what haven't I asked you about the by phone days that I should have?
Well, one thing that was really interesting is that because the business was basically the two of us, we were responsible for all of the technical for at some time basically four companies and our own. And this was custom built and custom software uh, machines. So if there was a problem, we had to jump to Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, wherever. And one time I arrived in New York to be met at the airport and told, the problem in New York isn't serious. We have a problem in Hong Kong. Get on the plane immediately and go to Hong Kong.
Wow.
So I flew into New York, flew over to Hong Kong, and then was up for like 36 hours fixing the problem on off hours because you didn't want to mess with the computer during the time the markets were open. So it was really a lot of fun, and it was really sort of cowboy days in a way. And it just created a real great atmosphere of working.
And you got to work with your brother, which sounds like you guys had a good working relationship.
We had an excellent working relationship. Bill's really, in a lot of ways, the creative mind in terms of figuring out what the user wanted and where we could go with things and what we could add, and gave all the business background that I couldn't. And I did a lot of the computer design work and the lower level computer programming.
Bill, you looked like you had an answer to my question about what I should have asked you,
Well,
but didn't.
the name by phone was originally with the idea of wouldn't you rather shop by phone? So it was a method of using a phone over, to a computer because you would dial up, and then the phone would take you to a computer that would let you shop. So that's where the name came from.
Right, and it was BUY dash
Yeah,
phone.
yeah,
Although a couple of the articles I read, they got it wrong. They did it BY dash
yeah.
phone, which
Well, it was because we were thinking is wouldn't you rather shop by phone, and then we changed it to buy being a purchase because we thought that we could do sales over the phone, but that
right.
never. I don't think we ever did that. We never went to the idea that somebody could actually order something over the phone. We didn't take credit cards. We never went to that level.
What are we looking at, David? You're showing me let your fingers
That's
do the
what
walking sort of.
exactly.
Okay, we've got
Um, it was
a
our original logo.
huh. All right, so we've got the let your fingers do your walking fingers, but instead of a phone, it's over a computer terminal.
Yep,
Um, Neat. Do you have any other stuff? Any other, I don't know, printouts,
we do. We
anything?
do. We
What do you
have
have?
the original mailing that was done to people to get them to sign up. It was a fold, and on the inside information, they could actually fill out their own ad and send it back to us. Um,
And
yeah,
those were free ads. Some of those were free, and then if they put in more information, it got charged. But we were asking for free information first.
yeah. Um,
What else you got?
and we sent out some early mailers and one of the original by phone credit card.
Nice. The by
Which,
phone business card.
yeah, wasn't a
Uh-huh.
credit card, definitely.
Yeah.
Bonus card.
Oh,
Huh. Neat. This whole thing just makes me happy. The fact that you guys, two brothers, created this thing, and maybe by phone wasn't a success by itself, but it led you to other ventures that were,
That's a fair statement. It
yeah.
wasn't really a success by itself. It was a labor of love. We enjoyed it. We had a good time doing it. It wasn't financially profitable, but it did lead us to other things.
Hmm.
And I do
Nice.
remember another quick story, which was we got a
Please.
call one day from a guy who was a computer science student at UCLA. And he said, by the way, do you know that 4 of my 5 classes demonstrated your system in the class? That was impressive.
Hmm. Huh. Nice. So people knew about it. They wanted to show it off, demonstrate
Academics,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 And in fact, that's how the Canadians got to us too, because they went over to UCLA and talked to some professor, we don't know
That's true.
who told them to go talk to us because they wanted to set up some sort of a business with like Yellow Pages. And so they were given our information and they contacted us from there, from UCLA. The UCLA must have liked us a lot, but they were very close. I mean, they were within the zone they could get on for free.
Right.
Right.
Did you get feedback from users other than like
No,
the UCLA people?
no, I don't think we met anybody.
Huh.
Who, we heard about this professor who referred the Canadians to us. Other than that, David, I don't think we ever knew anybody. There were some businesses that advertised. We knew them.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if they used it though.
There were people who were telling us that they used it and really liked it, but I'm not sure how they got to us.
And we also did get some people to help us with it to sort of be a focus group for us. So we would talk to them as users. But I don't know
Oh,
that I don't yeah,
the, the other thing we had that I completely forgot about is we allowed people to rate things like movies very early so that
Hmm.
we could recommend movies based on user ratings. I don't think that had been done before.
You guys probably did you should have patented all these ideas because there's a lot of things that probably hadn't been done before on computers. Neat.
well, the movie rating was good. It was on a scale of 1 to 10. You would rate the movies, and my wife would do it because she saw a lot of movies. And her lowest rating was an 8. Partly because she loved movies, but also I think she said that she read about a movie before she would go see it. So she knew that she only wanted to see good movies. I don't know. But you could get on there, and if you've seen a movie, you could give it a rating, and then it gets added in with the others. And so we had average ratings for various movies. I guess that's an early Rotten Tomatoes.
I think I have what I need. Thank you both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
This is fun.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, please consider supporting my Patreon at patreon.com/Savitz. I've been publishing interviews like these since 2013 and would like to continue doing so for a long time, and your financial support will help. Thanks.